All right, today I wanted to give a teaser of what we've called remote release promotions. And we've gone through a few names on the way, but this has really come out of some ideas that have come from the community and a bunch of people within Octopus itself. And the elevator pitch is that we are planning a feature which enables you to promote releases across multiple Octopus servers but in a nice way. And we do have customers out there today that are doing this, and we've met with quite a few of them. And our saying is it hurts real good. You can do it using the migrator, but you have problems. You can do it using your own tooling you've built against their API, but you've probably got problems and feeling friction. You can do it using replication of packages and then scripting your deployments and making sure that the projects are scripted, but then you've also got problems. And another way you can do it is using offline drops, which is okay if you're happy with them, but again, you've got some problems there. And I won't go into those in much detail because we'll talk about that briefly in the RFC that we're writing at the moment about remote release promotions. And so this is a nice image that Jess and the team came up with. And that little green thing in the middle is what we're calling a release bundle. And the idea here is we're not promoting the idea that the companies build brick walls and have octopuses climb up steps and hand things to each other. The intention is that typically in an architecture where you're required to have strict separation between environments, your Octopus servers would be pretty much operating in isolation. And we'll look at that now. So this is a very basic drawing of what a current architecture in Octopus 2 and 3 would look like. We've got possibly a great big dev octopus with lots of developers, lots of projects, lots of local environments and machines. And then you might reach out to, you might have a project within that organization that you need to deploy out to a segregated network, possibly for PCI DSS compliance or other security issues. Or you might actually be reaching out to third-party client instances. And one of the customers has blogged about this recently, Confirm It or Confirm IT. And they have a product that they install on third-party client machines, and the way they've chosen to do that, and they blogged about it, was installing an instance of Octopus server inside the client's network. But there's no real connectivity between them. So we really, for this feature, we really are leveraging the idea of spaces, which we've recently introduced in a blog post. And the way that I've been thinking about spaces, and I think we're starting to coalesce around a common understanding, is that it is just a logical container of projects, environments, life cycles, teams, permissions, and all that good stuff inside Octopus. So if we look at that architecture diagram I showed earlier, you've got that blue space, which is what you might call dev space, and then the green area is the PCI space, and then the orange area could be the client space. And they're all three different, I guess, logical sets of servers backed by a database. But the name we're starting to give that is it's a space within Octopus. So you could see that they act as security boundaries, but they're also containers for the other things in Octopus like projects. Now, the trick is when you've got this kind of environment set up in Octopus 3 or 2 prior to this feature we're building, there would be complete isolation between the two, and they really don't talk to each other apart from some kind of either manual or automated process you configure for yourself, either leveraging our tools or something you built on your own. Another way of looking at that is two different browser instances representing the two different spaces. So you've got your dev test space with your development and test environments, and then you've got your prod space with your production environment, and they're completely separated, different URLs, different groups of users to bring that compliance into place. But really hard to get those releases across. And you can see there that we do want to have the concept of the same project, and we do want to have the concept of these releases being deployed through. So here's another diagram, just to make it a little bit clearer. And the idea here is that we want to make it a lot easier for you to extend your life cycles across space boundaries. And so in this example here, this is like a PCI DSS compliant scenario. And if you can interpret that dashboard a little bit, we've deployed 1.0.0 all the way through dev test and then production. And that probably involved a USB key or some kind of manual carrying of that release and the packages across to the remote space, to the prod space. And then 1.1.0 has gone through dev and test, is now ready to go to production. But how do you get it over there? And what we're hoping to do is a great big green button like we usually do that says promote to prod space. And then Octopus would go ahead and bundle that up. So you'd probably be clicking this button over in the dev space, and Octopus would bundle everything required to deploy that project or that release of your project into another space. So we go into more detail in our RFC that we're writing about what that bundle will contain, but if you can just imagine for now, everything required to deploy that release. So with our PCI DSS example, you're still probably going to take that bundle and manually move it across the network boundary somehow, and then import it into the remote Octopus server in the prod space, and then click the deploy button. And basically then it'll get deployed into the production environment, just like it would have into the dev test environment, in the dev test space. And then you could potentially bring back the results of the deployment into the dev test space. And again, that would probably involve some sort of manual intervention to do that. Another example might be that you've just got a fully connected environment. This is probably not a really great example, but I just wanted to show the comparison between these two, where you've got this segregation, and then you might introduce multiple spaces, but they might be all connected by Octopus Data Center Manager, which is also in a recent RFC, which is something, a product that we're planning that will help you manage multiple spaces. And so if you can imagine here, this space might be just geographically distributed. So there's not necessarily a security boundary in place. And so you can connect these Octopus servers or these spaces together. And so in this instance, you might find there's no manual intervention. You just promote that release 1.1.0 to the remote production environment, and Octopus will bundle that up for you, automatically ship it across to the other space, and allow somebody to ingest that bundle and then deploy it to the production environment. And then it could automatically push the results of that deployment back into the dev test space. So essentially you end up with a really nice dashboard like this, where in your dev test space, all of a sudden you've glued in the idea of a remote environment, and you can see that 1.0.0 has been successfully deployed. And so in that way, you could possibly build up these aggregated dashboards that reach across space boundaries to show interesting things. So one of the big parts of this feature, if we were to really break it down to the biggest blocks, is it allows you to chain life cycles together. And so in this diagram, we've got a life cycle in dev space, where you can sort of see your development and test environments listed in the life cycle. And then what we're looking to do is allow you to define spaces as part of your life cycle. And so in this case here, you can see the third step in the life cycle defined in the dev space actually reaches out to the QA space and says you can promote a release bundle across the QA space. And then the QA team have their own permissions and their own projects and their own environments they deploy to and test in, and they might promote through their own lifecycle they've defined in their space. But once they're done with it, you can continue on through the lifecycle in the dev space, and then you might reach out to the production space. And so we promote that same bundle across over to the prod space and later deploy it to prod, then with the information flowing back through to your dashboard. There's a few different ideas about how you could chain these life cycles together, but if you can imagine just being able to build these composite life cycles by chaining them together, that's what we're looking at. We'll go into more detail in the RFC. So Octopus 4, we've been talking about, and we could see scenarios like this, all managed by ODCM, by the data center manager here. And this is an example where you might have a big team or a big group of teams, a big organization with multiple spaces in their dev test environment, and they might have all of that hosted in the US on premises. but then they reach out to the public cloud in Europe and Australia to deploy to production environments. And so this might be a model that you decide to use when you've got really big packages to deploy. And so you want to have a background replication of those packages out to your remote data centers, so that then when you are ready to deploy, the deployment goes quickly. Another scenario you might use is that PCI DSS scenario that we mentioned before, or you might be reaching out to client spaces. And so in this scenario here, we're imagining you might end up having multiple Octopus data center managers in each of your security zones that manage their own spaces. And then you'd be able to reach out using remote release promotions and promote releases across those space boundaries. So that's a really quick teaser on remote release promotions. There's a lot more detail coming, and have a look at the RFC we're going to produce really soon.